What is going on, everyone? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics. I haven't been yelled at in the comments section for a little while, so I thought, hey, why don't I make a video about this post? Saw this post on the CGC Comics fans Facebook group. What are some good comics to invest in long term? I expect I will probably get negative comments just based on the thumbnail, because I have been doing this long enough to know that the inevitable comics are not for investing. Comics are only for reading. Investors are ruining collecting, blah, 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 blah. I know that those are general comments that I will receive, but that doesn't really help anybody that is asking this question. And you can also see that based on the little emojis down here, when you've got the little laughing face, there are plenty of comments in there that are of that similar vein. There are some comments that are helpful in there. There are people that give lots of different recommendations. But hey, I thought that this would be an interesting topic. Cover basically my thoughts on it, especially right now with what prices are doing, going up, going down, all that kind of thing, as well as giving some recommendations on individual books and what I think you maybe might want to consider. Now, these are not, you don't have to rush out and buy any of this stuff. You don't have to buy these books. This is just my thoughts on this topic. So, first of all, we'll just start with, are collectibles something you can invest in? So I'm going to keep that a little higher level where it's not just comics, but it's collectibles, because people buy all kinds of stuff. They buy comics, they buy cards, they buy, I don't know, stamps and movie posters and all this kind of stuff. And there's all kinds of different collectibles that are out there. And I know some people love to say that you can't invest in that, but I disagree. I think most of the time, these types of statements, and you see this across all collectibles, it's not just comic collectors that make these kinds of statements. But I think most of the time this is coming from people who are upset that those items have gotten more expensive and they want to blame someone for it. And that blame often comes towards the quote investor community of that hobby. And I think that that's, I mean, it plays a role. I mean, obviously it plays a role, but these things are also expensive because people love them. You know, that is one reason that collectibles get so much attention, that people love these different things. They mean a lot to them. And so it's not just investors. I mean, there are people who are, you know, quote, just the true collectors or whatever you want to call it, that are also paying huge amounts of money for this. You know, so they are also spending a lot of money and also potentially moving the prices of those items. Now, I do think that if you take a analytical approach to collectibles, you can use them as an alternative place to put some money. I am not saying that you should put everything there. They're definitely something that you can consider a higher risk, because it's not like there are financials behind these. There isn't something where there's earnings or anything. Like, the comics, collectibles go up in price or change in price because of either inflation or because of demand. And the bigger thing is demand. Are there new people entering that space? Are there new people that are interested in that? And, you know, some people will argue that comics is something that's decreasing in that area. And so that's definitely a risk that you have to consider there as well. But I also think that collectibles as something that you invest in has an added benefit that I get a lot more joy out of owning some, you know, cool comic versus Apple stock. You know, so it's something that you do have that intangible benefit that goes with it as well. So just something to think about, that it's not all financial in terms of that investment. It's that you're getting something out of owning that as well. Now, if you are, quote, investing in comics, you do really need to keep emotions out of it as much as possible. It's my personal take on it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy things that you enjoy. That is something that does help with that level of enjoyment with it. But you also need to be aware of what other people out there like as well, because ultimately that is what allows you to sell an item and what potentially causes an item to go up in value. You also need to be aware of what you're paying for it. What you pay initially really does matter if you're looking at this from an investment standpoint. If you think about it like if you were buying a house or anything else, your buy-in price really does matter. So you do have to think about that as well. And that's why I am always recommending things like Go Collect, GPA, cover price, whatever it is, so that you are aware what you're paying going in. If you buy something and you immediately paid 30% more than what it's going for and it's relatively common, you're going to have a hard time getting out of that item without losing money. So just be aware of that. Now, when you have items that are more rare, whether it's because of grade or just rarity in general, there are different things to consider there. But making sure that you are taking that, like I said, that analytical approach about what you're paying is important, and being aware of what that current market is. Now, the other thing is that movies and other types of content really do matter. For Marvel, especially, movies have been, I mean, come on, they've been basically garbage for like 5 years now. And that has definitely hurt the, like the thesis, the investment thesis on comics. Because for me, like that's one of the things, especially with Marvel comics, I've always said it's like Disney is one of the best advertisers for comic books. And as long as Disney likes to make money, then comics will keep doing well. But man, Disney has not done a good job for the last 5 years. And I have no doubt in my mind that that has hurt the value in comics. So if we don't start to see some type of turnaround in the movies, and whether that's Marvel or whether it's James Gunn with DC, I absolutely think that is going to hurt the value of comics long term. And maybe some people want that. Maybe some people want that because then the prices go down, they can afford the books they want, whatever. But if you're looking at this from an investment where you don't want the prices to go down, I do think that the movie properties, TV properties, all that kind of stuff really do have an impact. All right. So now at a high level, what do you start with, in my opinion, if you are looking to invest in comics? So the first thing I would say is popular characters, because you want something that lots of people enjoy. It not only does it make it easier to sell that item when you ultimately want to sell it, but it also makes it more likely that there's going to be more people interested in it and driving up the value of that book. The next one I would say is popular covers. I mean, comics are a visual medium. And so what's on the cover really matters. And that's why covers that are cool, that have characters on it that people really like, whether that's also because it's a first appearance of a character or whatever it is, it makes a big difference. If the cover isn't good, it is going to hurt the demand, hurt the value for that book. And the last one I'll say is popular artists. This especially comes into play when you're talking about the golden age, some into silver and bronze, and even into modern, but mostly in the golden age, where a lot of the big first appearances and that kind of thing are just so expensive that people start migrating to other types of books. It's also where you have genres like pre-code horror, where it's not really a first appearance with pre-code horror for the most part. You're generally buying what is a cool cover, what cool cover or what popular cover artist created that cover. You've got artists like L.B. Cole, Alex Schomburg, Jack Davis, Johnny Craig, like all these different popular cover artists. And that's one of the areas that you may want to start. Now, next, what are things to avoid? In my opinion, I'm not saying you shouldn't buy these if you just collect comics in general, but if you are talking about investing, you avoid run filler. You do not buy run filler ever. And so like run filler is just, it's not going to get you that return. It's going to be much more flat just across the board. And there's a lot less demand for it. It's a lot harder to sell. I'll also say avoid short-term spec, because this question specifically you can see here is invest in long-term. So we're saying maybe 10, 20 years, maybe more than that. And so if you're looking at short-term spec, that is not what we're talking about here. You have to be willing to buy and sell very quickly. And if you don't sell at the right time, you're going to have to take probably an immediate loss. So I'm saying avoid short-term spec based on movies, all that kind of stuff. The last one I'll say to avoid is, I'll call them dead genres. And an example I'll give you is Westerns. I know some people think Westerns are coming back, but I mean, maybe, but it's unlikely. So I would avoid things where it's dead genres like that. So I'll say Westerns, I'll say For the most part, like funny animal type books, that kind of stuff, especially from the golden age era and then into the silver age. That's personally the types of books that I would, for the most part, avoid. Now, the other thing is you don't need to be in a hurry for anything, in my opinion, right now. Take your time, pick wisely. You are going to have opportunities for the most part to pick up books. Even super rare books will come up for sale again. And so I gotta say, like, do not be in a hurry to buy anything right now, regardless of the era. That is my opinion. Now, let's take a look at some books because I'm going to give some examples of different books across the different eras. And we're going to start with moderns. So, first one here, just as an example, some first appearances. I've got Batman Adventures 12. And now I will say, especially for silver, bronze, copper, modern, I personally would not be buying anything right now, like literally nothing. And that's because I still haven't seen where I feel like there's really been a turn in the price for comics since the spike, the boom that we had during, COVID and all of that. So if you're looking at this solely from an investment side, and that's what I'm caveating this with, I would not buy any silver, bronze, modern, copper book unless it was like half off. Like it's like if it's some screaming deal, sure. But otherwise, I wouldn't, maybe I'll get a bunch of hate for that, but I just still do not trust the pricing for those books. And I just worry that on average, they are still trending down. And so, I mean, for example, we can just look at Batman Adventures 12. We can look at the pricing for this book. And just to kind of give you an idea, what those trends are like, with this one. And you can see like, it still feels like it's trending down. I mean, we'll just look at like a year ago, this book was going for around 2,200. It's now going for like 17 to 1,800. And I don't necessarily see it slowing down. And so until I see a turn, I just have no interest in buying those books. And I'm not going to recommend other people buy those books just to make someone feel good about it. Like I want to be honest, and I wouldn't touch them. And so like this, it still looks like it's trending down to me. I mean, even though it's below the prices that it was at prior to the comic boom. So that's my take there. And that's my take across the board on these. So just be ready. Now, another type of book that you might want to look for moderns, because with moderns, there aren't a lot of first appearances that are big books that you might want to go for. There's like NYX 3. There's in modern, I'll put Amazing Spider-Man 361, like, the first Carnage. With moderns, a lot of what you'll want to look for, in my opinion, are something like more rare variants. And so we've got an example here, Batman 608. This is the retailer incentive variant. This is for a modern book. This is a rare book. You can see here on the census, only 242 universal copies, 55 9/8. It's a very expensive book. You can look at this, like a 9/8 last sale, almost $7,000, and it was over a year ago. I think there's been some signed copies that have sold more recently, but basically you can see like this is not a book that comes up for sale hardly ever, a few times a year typically. And it's a pretty expensive book. And so for modern books, rarity is definitely something that I would be looking for. Just a couple other examples. We've got Uncanny X-Men 510. This is a J. Scott Campbell sketch variant. Again, very rare book. Only 42 universal copies. For a modern book, this is a rare book. You can see, again, how expensive this book is. Just in June, a 9.8 sold for almost $17,000. So that's the type of book that if I am looking at moderns, it's generally going to be something like this. So we've got Batman 608, we've got the X-Men 510, and then another one. This is basically the Ghost Grail book of the modern era, Amazing Spider-Man 667, the Delato variant, and 68 Universal. So it actually has more than the X-Men 510, but it's Spider-Man, who is the most popular character. So people that are trying to put together complete runs, definitely something that comes up. This book hasn't sold in quite a while too, probably because people are afraid to put it up because they're a little afraid of what the correction is going to be. because you can see here, this was, a $40,000 book along with the Ultimate Fallout 4 variant. This one was moving with the prices of that. So I am sure there is concern that if one comes up for sale, it's going to take like a 50% or more haircut. But this is the type of book that I would be keeping an eye out for, but I would also be extremely cautious of this. I wouldn't be paying anywhere near that $40,000 price. It's been, everything else is corrected. This probably will correct too. And you just got to be, be careful with it. But those are the modern books, just some examples where, you've got some keys, you have some very rare books. That's what I would focus on in the modern era. Now let's jump back to copper. So first one here, we've got Hulk 340. This is an example of a popular artist and a popular cover. There's nothing really key about this book in terms of first appearances, anything like that, but it's two very popular characters, Wolverine and Hulk. It's an iconic cover by Todd McFarlane. And so this has a lot going for it. However, again, and it's probably going to take a little bit for this one to load just because it sells a lot. But this is one of those where you can see, prices spiked and now they've been trending down. Now there is a little bit of an uptick down here, but is that because of the Deadpool Wolverine movie? Probably. And so this is the type of book that it's still double what it was during the comic boom. I don't trust it. And so I'm going to stay away from it. It's like, yeah, it's got this little flat area. It's been flat for, flat to slightly up for maybe 5 months. I'm going to keep waiting. So, yep, it's a cool book. It's the type of book I would keep an eye out for, but not one that I would be willing to pay the current market prices for. And we've got the most graded comic book of all time, Amazing Spider-Man 300. Hesitant to even click on this because it always takes a little bit for all these Amazing Spider-Man 300 sales to load. But you can see here, 30,000 universal copies, 1,671 9/8. Also Todd McFarlane. You can see like that famous cover artist, the most homaged cover of all time, plus Black Suit Spider-Man, plus first appearance of Venom. Like this is the type of book that it's popular for a reason. It has everything. It has one of the most popular artists of all time, one of the most popular characters in Spider-Man, or the most popular character of all time, one of his most popular villains in Venom, and then one of the most popular covers, if not the most popular cover of all time. So this book has absolutely everything going for it, but it also had a huge spike. I mean, a huge spike during the comic boom, and this clearly doesn't look like it's stopping its downward trend right now. And so that's why I'm not going to buy that book. And, it's like, even during the comic boom or pre-comic boom, it's still above those prices a little bit. And the difference is, since then, with those big spikes, tons and tons of books got graded during that period. So it means there is a much higher volume of these graded books out there now than there was prior to that spike. So that's why it's like, yep, prices are still coming down and I'm going to avoid it. Next one here, stick with Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 252, another one of the most popular books of all time. One of the books that more or less starts the Copper Age. It's right around that period. I think Secret Wars is generally when the Copper Age is generally thought to have started, but we've got, again, major iconic cover. We've got iconic character, first Black Suit Spider-Man, so a key issue on its own. But again, I'm going to end up showing you how that price history for this book. And you can see here, it's still trending down. Like, I'm just not going to touch books like that. It's like, we're talking about a long-term investment. I want to buy it when it's not still going down. And so I'm going to keep waiting. And, who knows, that could be 2 years from now that it's still going down. I'm going to watch it though. That's not a book I'm going to rush out and buy. Now, I will say I picked up one recently. I picked up a cheap raw copy. And that's because I felt like I got it for quite a bit below that going market price. And so I'm not saying you can't buy these things, but I'm not buying them at market price. Now we're going to move into the Bronze Age. So there are lots of big key issues in the Bronze Age. We've got this one, Amazing Spider-Man 129. You can see Spider-Man is a pretty constant trend here. Spider-Man is an extremely popular character. If you're looking for long-term investments, like I said, popular characters, that's one of the big ones. Popular covers like this. That's what I am focusing on. Now, I'm not going to look at a 9.8 just because they don't sell quite as often. Let's look at like a 9.4. So we have a few more copies that will have sold of that. So we get a little better picture of the current trend for this book. And to me, still looks like it's going down. It's like it's even down below some of these prices from back in 2018. We had a spike there. You can see we're right kind of around those 2018, even like I said, a little below those 2018 prices. And I'm going to wait until I see some type of like general trend up. That's just my take on it. I don't see, that was my whole point earlier where I said you don't need to rush. I don't see any reason to rush out and buy a book that is still trending down. So my opinion, Amazing Spider-Man 129 though, like big key book from the Bronze Age. Another one, if you want DC, got House of Secrets 92, first appearance of Swamp Thing. This book has actually held up relatively well. It still had a spike during the comic boom, but you can see here, like it didn't have as big of a spike, and it's a little more on that general trend. Like this is the type of book, like, again, I wouldn't rush out to buy it, but maybe it's the type of book that if you found it at the right price, it didn't have that huge spike that we had with a lot of Marvel books. And so your risk is probably pretty low. Like if you wanted to go out and buy one of these and you got it for a reasonable price, your risk is probably pretty low. But again, not rushing out to get it. Another book, I just wanted to point this one out because it is held up surprisingly well, especially in the 9.8. So we'll talk about the 9.8. We'll talk about some other grades as well. This is X-Men 101, first appearance of Phoenix, classic cover, one of my favorite covers of all time. You can see here, like this one, it did have big spikes during the comic boom, but it has held up pretty well, but still its general trend to me feels down. And so let's take a look at maybe a little lower grade one that sells just a little more regularly, like a 9.0. And I mean, to me, look at that, like downward trend. I gotta say it over and over again throughout this video. That's why I'm not looking at buying those books. But these are the types of books I would watch. If you're interested in getting into, investing in comics, yeah, these are great books to go after, but not right now, in my opinion. All right, then we've got Hulk 181, the biggest, most popular book of the Bronze Age. First full appearance, Wolverine, first cover appearance. Let's take a look. Let's go look at a 9.0. Again, I like looking at the ones where you're going to have a few more sales so you can see more consistent data. And yeah, it's like there's this little jump here, but that's a pretty strong downtrend still. So, I mean, that's one of the things you really do have to consider with these spikes in prices that we had. I mentioned it earlier. Those caused a lot of books to get graded. And so those books all have to be, they're out there now in that graded form. And so they impact the overall value of the book, your total volume, even though it's not like there's more copies, they were still out there before, but now that they're graded, it has a more direct effect, I feel like, on the value of these comics. And so that downward trend, I mean, there's no way I'm rushing out to that. Like that spike feels like a spike because of the movie. And I would just, again, not be rushing out to buy it. All right. Now let's move to the Silver Age. First one here. This is one that's just on here because to me, this is just an iconic cover. It's a John Buscema cover, one of my favorite covers, again, of all time. And an example of one where there's not really a big key thing here. I mean, yeah, first time Silver Surfer meets Thor, but it's not really a big key thing. This is popular because of the cover. And so let's look at like an 8.0 and just take a look at the prices on this. This wasn't immune to spikes. You can see this one's been flat for pretty long time. I mean, your risk is probably relatively low at this point with this book. It is still above its pre-comic boom prices though. And so to me, that's generally something where it's going to keep me cautious about purchasing that book. Let's take a look at a little bit lower grade, like a 6.0. And this one, for example, looks like it's still trending down some. And so like, that's what I'm looking at. That's why this information is important. Having things like Go Collect, having things like GPA. So you can look at that information. You can get an idea what prices are doing. And if I'm still seeing prices trending down, I mean, I'm not rushing out to buy it. Now let's look at Amazing Spider-Man 50. Again, and got another Amazing Spider-Man book. I think I've got him in every era. The only one I won't have him in is the Golden Age. So we have Amazing Spider-Man number 50, first appearance of Kingpin, iconic cover, very popular artist, John Romita. So another one of those that has everything. It's a first appearance, popular character, popular cover, popular artist. And so that's the type of stuff like I would be looking for if you want to be investing long-term in comics. However, again, downward trend. Like, I mean, it's just like over and over again, we can go across different grades and we can see here a 5.0, like, yeah, it's pretty flat for a while. It's still not turning up though. Like to certain grades, maybe the risk is a little lower than others, but that still doesn't get me to go like, yeah, I want to rush out and buy that. And that's why I'm saying like, you don't need to be in a rush. I don't see any reason to rush out to buy that book. Then we've got, of course, Amazing Fantasy 15, the biggest key of the Silver Age, first appearance of Spider-Man. This book seemed like it had gotten flat, like it had actually maybe reached a bottom, but then I've been seeing prices continue to trend down some. And so same type of thing, like silver, bronze, modern, copper, like, I don't know. I mean, you could see like, this is that general upward trend I see with Amazing Fantasy 15, but we've had a couple lower sales again. It's one of those that if you're looking 10 to 15 years out, your risk at this point is probably pretty low. But again, I would pick the book. I wouldn't be overpaying. This is not a book you need to overpay for. It comes up for sale all the time. I think the next Comic Link auction might have like 5 copies. It's stuff like that where you'll see in these big auctions that you have multiple copies of this book. You do not need to rush out to get it. There are, as you can see over here, 2,600 universals. They come up for sale regularly. You don't need to rush to buy it. If the bidding is going too high on one, just let it go. Get the next one. That's all. That's my main piece of advice here for a book like this. All right, now we're to the Golden Age. The stuff that I tend to be most involved in. And so, yeah, I'm sure people will say it's like, oh, that's why he's saying to buy these. But I'm still saying across every genre, like you don't need to rush to buy anything. I even said that with even super rare books. Like we had Suspense 3. I mean, I'll show you that one. For example, we'll start with that one. So Suspense Comics number 3. So here's Suspense Comics number 3. This one, it has a popular artist. This is Alex Schomburg. It is a cool cover, one of the coolest covers from the Golden Age. So it has two of the 3 things. It doesn't have really a popular character on the cover, but this is a book that when you look at its rarity, only 26 universals, 43 total, but we have now had, and I think there's been even another one maybe that came up for sale that hasn't been pulled in here. And so I think we've had 3 in the last 6 months, maybe 5 months. And so, yes, they don't come up often, but they do come up periodically. And these are taken into account like restored copies and that kind of thing too. I mean, it's a rare Golden Age book, but it's not like you have 0 chances to get it. I mean, yeah, like this in 2019, no copies came up for sale. 2021, no copies came up for sale. So you do have to have patience. If you really want it, this is one where people will pay up for them. That's where rarity really does come into play, but they will come up for sale. They do come up for sale periodically. And so you do have opportunities to get those books, even when they're extremely rare like this. Now, let's start with Action Comics number 1, because that's one where you could easily make the argument where it's like, yeah, that 3.0 that was on Heritage didn't even sell. And it didn't even hit $1 million. Like the reserve was 960,000 and it did not sell. And so you go, okay, like that's true. But if we look at a 3.0, we can see that in 2014, that was a 310,000 book. There was this huge sale in 2021, peak comic boom, for 1.6 million. So the argument could be that was just way too high. Now, this copy is much nicer presenting than the other copy. This was the copy here that was attempted to sell in this last Heritage auction. You can see in 2002, it sold for 48,000. So if this person's asking about a long-term investment, I mean, even if this one did terrible in auction and it sold for, say, 600,000, that's 12, 13 times what this book was going for 20 years ago. So that's the type of thing you need to look at there. It's like, yep, it probably corrected significantly from where it was here. You know, again, this one is nicer. That's the tough thing with Golden Age, is that appearance between copies can, even though the same grades, can be very different, especially when you start getting into lower grades like this. So yeah, maybe this one still sells for less today. Maybe this one sells for like 1.3 million or 1.2 million or something like that. But if that other copy, maybe it would have sold at auction for, if it actually had been let go, maybe it goes for 700,000. That's still over double what this copy sold for 10 years ago, and 15 times what this copy sold for 20 years ago. So that's the type of thing you're looking at long term with those books. But yep, they can still go down. You can still overpay for something and, you know, get caught up in bidding and all of that. So this, again, something to think about there. But yeah, here's an example of iconic cover, iconic character, major first appearance, type of book that has everything, but it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not everybody can afford that type of book, if not millions of dollars. So we've got ones that are iconic pieces of history, very popular cover content. And so this is Pre-Code Horror. We've got Crime Suspense Stories 22. It's used in the Senate investigation, done by Johnny Craig. One of the more violent covers that was ever done, has been homaged a ton of times. So it, again, has a lot going for it. It did get overheated during the comic boom period. So if you look at, say, let's look at like a 4 or 5. And so you can see, like, it had a big spike here. This is 2022, jumped to $9,000. Before that, it was $4,000. But this is also a book that, if you look across multiple grades, this book tends to generally trend up long term. Very similar to like Amazing Fantasy 15. This book just chugs up year after year after year. And it may have spikes that are little outliers like that, and then, you know, corrects back down, but just on average tends to go up. That's the type of thing you want to look for. This might not be your cup of tea. You know, you may not have any interest in pre-code horror and violent covers like this, but there are a lot of people that collect this type of comic, that like the historical significance of this comic. It's from a very popular publisher. Those are big things that can add value to that book. Now, another one, just a book that I have, you know, one of my favorite covers of all time, Mass Comics #1. This is L.B. Cole. So this is an example of a popular cover and a popular artist. There's not a popular character here or anything, but L.B. Cole is one of the more popular Golden Age artists. This, to me, is the best cover that he did. Some people will argue Mask #2. Some people will argue Blue Bolt #105, which is also one of my favorite covers that he did. And so these are the types of books, again, that you have to also be aware of how much the prices have changed. So just something to think about with them. And so let's see, they really are not common. So it's not like they sell all the time. But if, let's look at like a 3.0. This is a book that back in 2014, you can see $550. 2017, $1,000. 2019, $11,000. 2020, $8,000, $8,000, $10,000, $13,000. So yes, they tend to trend up over time. Sometimes someone might overpay once, and then they got a number of years before they get back to even with it. And so, yeah, it's like, this is the type of impact you can have when there's only 68 universals and maybe 5 new people get interested in this book, and they only come up for sale a couple times a year. And that really drives up value. That can have a big impact on prices. Just something to be aware of with Golden Age is that a few new entrants to the market can have very big impacts. Whereas with Copper and Modern, when you've got tens of thousands of copies graded, it takes a lot of entrants to the market to impact those prices. So that's one of the things I like about the Golden Age. What makes it a little more stable is you don't need to have nearly as many people interested in those books. But you can also see some fairly wild fluctuations depending on, are those few people participating in that auction? Are they aware of it? Are they watching it? But yeah, this is one of those that it is just popular because of the artist and the, you know, and the cover, and just because it's one of my favorite covers. If you want to see Blue Bolt 105, which is one of his other very popular in-demand covers, it's more of a sci-fi type cover though. It's this one right here. It's also an L.B. Cole cover. All right. Then we've got, I mean, there are still superheroes that were around. Like we had Superman, we've got Batman, and we've got very popular covers again for Batman and his villains. So this is an example, Detective Comics #69. And so to me, this is one of the coolest, if not the coolest Joker cover that's out there. So another one of those books, that's something that you might want to look for. Joker is extremely popular. Batman is extremely popular. Again, only 119 universals, 144 total. There are way more than 119 people out there that like Batman and the Joker and would love to own this book. And so that's the type of thing that you can consider when you are looking at books like this. Now, they aren't cheap. I mean, these definitely aren't cheap, but I mean, if you're looking at, say, like long-term investments, if you're going to spend $5,000 on some stock or whatever, something like that, maybe, some percentage of what you were going to buy with that, you put into some type of comic, but it's not guaranteed, right? I mean, like, look at this. Like, this book in 2016 was 4,400. We had some spikes, 7,000 here, 9,000 during the comic boom, and then most recent sale dropped back down to 4,300. So there are no guarantees in this. I don't want to give people any false hopes or anything. It is a risk to put your money into something like anything else. These are just the types of books that have reasonable potential to do well, focusing on things, like I said, popular characters, covers, and artists. Then another popular character and a very in-demand popular cover, Phantom Lady, number 17. This is like the marquee Good Girl art cover done by one of the most popular artists of that time period, Matt Baker. And again, a very expensive book. We can see here a 6.0, 42,000, 4.0, 24,000, 3.5 here, 28,000. I mean, very expensive, very in-demand book, and just the type of thing that you want to potentially look for. This is very similar to, say, the Blue Bolt 105 or the Mass Comics #1. It's like, it's one of the marquee books for this creator. And so that's the type of thing that can be a good long-term investment. The last one, I picked this one because of historical significance. So this is Captain America number 46. This is the Holocaust cover. This has, again, a number of things going for it. One, historically significant book. It's the only cover that really depicts the Holocaust during World War II. It's also a very popular character in Captain America and Bucky. It is a very popular cover artist, possibly the most popular cover artist of the Golden Age, Alex Schomburg. And so and a important cover. So this one really has, again, everything going for it, other than like a first appearance. And so this is the type of book that, again, we can see goes for a lot of money. Now it has come down here. You can see we had a big sale earlier this year for this grade, 33,600. Last sale, 27,600. But if we let's look at some other grades. And just, you can kind of see the long-term trend with it. Generally trending up. 2017, 15,000, 15,000 in 2019, 21,000 in 2020, and then 31,000 in 2023. These are the types of books that, because they sell so rarely, that's why I want to make that point, you can have big fluctuations, and why I also say, do not force yourself to buy something. Take your time, pick wisely. Like the one I just showed, what was that, a 3.5? I'm sure, maybe it wasn't the 3.5. It was a 4. I'm sure the person that paid 27,600 is happier than the person that paid 33,600. And so, yeah, like maybe, just a little too excited in this auction, paid up for it. And then another one got pulled out and went for $6,000 less. Doesn't mean either of these are necessarily bad purchases, but the second one, obviously that person is further ahead than the first person. So that's why I just want to say, like, take your time, pick wisely. If your focus is investing, if you just want to own the book, do whatever you want. But the question that was in this Facebook post was, what are some good comics to invest in long term? That's why I'm saying what I'm saying in this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully I don't get too much hate in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.